Does NASCAR still need a 600-mile race? How's it going, you guys? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. A couple things to talk about today before Memorial Day weekend hits. We got a lot of great racing, not just NASCAR, obviously, but if you're a fan of all motorsports, got a lot of great racing going on this weekend. So I got just a couple stories I want to hit on. One I want to catch up on from actually last weekend, and then we got to talk about the Hall of Fame nominees that were revealed yesterday. But first, again, I have to shout out my friends at Ridge Wallet for sponsoring Out of the Groove and making this show possible. Being both a full-time college student and a busy YouTuber makes it really hard sometimes to balance the two. So I couldn't do this without the support I get, not just from you guys watching, but of course from sponsors like the amazing Ridge Wallet. They make these amazing wallets. I've shown them to you before. You know what to expect. I've seen some of y'all in the comments already take advantage of this great deal they have just for fans of the show. You can go to ridgewallet.com/groovy to get 10% off your order, and they don't just have these awesome wallets. They have backpacks, they have power banks, all sorts of stuff. I encourage you to go check them out. You can use this right here, or of course I have the link down in the description. Great deal just for fans of this show. Again, a big thank you to Ridge Wallet for supporting my show, supporting what we're doing over here, supporting the community. Couldn't do this without them, so big thank you once again. Okay, now we got some drama to talk about, some controversial quotes, some controversial opinions to talk about. If there's one thing the internet loves and just feeds upon, it's controversial opinions. So we're gonna have to run this back a few days, just before the All-Star race, as a matter of fact, to a tweet I saw on Twitter from Jeff Gluck, a report I saw as well from a few other people. There's kind of a chain that I'm sure a few of you guys have already probably seen, but I want to shed some more light on it here because I think it raises an interesting point, and it's involving some big names in NASCAR. So Denny Hamlin, we're talking about good old DH. He said something kind of interesting last week, talking to his friends at Toyota, a special deal for them. Here is the full quote I saw. They asked him a couple of questions, he answered, and he was pretty blunt, and I think he's going to get quite the conversation started here. When asked, does the sport still need a 600-mile race, Hamlin says, no, nothing. The sport doesn't need any particular thing. I don't think that anything is totally necessary. If the race was 300 miles, you're going to have the same, I believe, core group watch the race, and possibly even more that are interested because it's not 5 hours long. Hamlin goes on to say a little bit more. Asked, is there any part of the tradition that you like? And he responded, tradition, schmadition. It's whatever. All sports adapt and change. I hate it when people say, well, that's just the way it always was. Things are different. I'd be just as happy with a Coke 300 trophy as a Coke 600. To be honest with you, I'm for whatever, but I certainly know that from my friends, they choose to come to All-Star Week and not 600 Week because it's just too long and they don't want to sit here for 5 hours. A couple kind of long quotes. Let's kind of unpack what he's saying there, because it's Denny Hamlin. He has definitely come out in favor and against things that other drivers really don't like talking about in the past. Denny Hamlin said at the beginning of this year he'd be in favor of shortening races. Other drivers were not nearly as quick to jump on that bandwagon. Hamlin a couple of years ago was one of the first I heard saying that NASCAR's business model needed to be restructured so that more money from the TV deals was going to the race teams. Sounds like that's actually starting to happen now, so maybe Hamlin was right about that a couple of years ago. But needless to say, Denny Hamlin says what's on his mind, whether it's unpopular, whether it's popular. Denny Hamlin speaks his mind, whether you like it or not. And so this is a very interesting conversation we have. He doesn't come out right away and say that NASCAR needs to get rid of the Coke 600 or shorten it, but he definitely hints that it would probably be beneficial to NASCAR, in his opinion, if they did shorten the Coke 600. Now, I agree with Hamlin on one or 2 points here, most notably when he talks about tradition. You know, I have nothing against tradition. I understand that tradition is very important to some people. It allows people to have a deep connection to an event or another person or to something, and that's a good thing. I don't sit here and just want to break tradition just to break tradition for the sake of it. If I'm going to break tradition by changing something, there needs to be a good reason for it. But at the same time, if you want to continue a tradition, I need a better reason than just, hey, that's the way it's always been, so we can't change it because that's just how it's always been. That's not a very good reason, in my opinion. You need to have more evidence as to why that tradition should stay the same. Otherwise, I might be okay with changing it. With this Coke 600 argument, does NASCAR still need a 600-mile race? I think there are actual arguments to be made on either side of that. I am not opposed to the idea of NASCAR shortening the lengths of some races going forward. I am not opposed to the idea of, a lot of 400 and 500 mile races being dropped down to 300 mile races, kind of like Hamlin was hinting at there. Not because I personally would prefer shorter race distances. I would gladly sit there and watch a 4-hour race every weekend if I had to. I just like NASCAR that much, and I think there's a lot of hardcore fans out there that would agree with me that just, hey, we like racing, we'll watch 4 hours of racing no matter what. But I also personally want NASCAR to grow and thrive, and I am convinced that 4 or 5 hour races are not going to help NASCAR's health going forward. Look at the fastest growing motorsport in the world, Formula One. Those races are done in 90 minutes. Not saying we need to shorten them that much or turn into Formula One, but I think they do have a point there. You look at like the NBA, games are 2 hours long. Baseball's constantly trying to shorten the lengths of their games because their games often go 3.5 hours, and a lot of fans don't really want to sit and watch a baseball game for 3.5 hours, so baseball's trying to speed up their games. It's common just in this day and age with so many more places to find entertainment, online, TV, movies, sports. There's so many different entertainment outlets out there that can get your attention. People just have shorter attention spans. That's just proven. That's the way it is, unfortunately. I shouldn't say unfortunately. It's not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think, but it is different. It's something that has changed just in the last decade or two. So from a fan's perspective, I like 500, 600 mile races because I like spending my whole Sunday watching NASCAR. I'm a big fan. I like watching racing. But also from a fan's perspective, I want NASCAR to do well, and I want NASCAR to grow. And I don't know that 500 and 600 mile races are going to help NASCAR grow. I think they are only stunting its growth at this point because a lot of people, a lot of potential new fans, likely don't have 4.5 hours to spend every weekend to watch NASCAR. And that's something that maybe NASCAR should address, and I think that's what Denny Hamlin's bringing up here. That being said, even if NASCAR decides to shorten the lengths of a lot of races, I will say, even then, I am a firm believer that I think the Daytona 500, the Coke 600, and maybe the Southern 500, and you can maybe name one or two other races, maybe the Bristol night races, I think those should stay at their current distance. I think NASCAR, one thing that sets itself apart from other motorsports is that it is kind of an endurance race. I mean, it's obviously not like the 24 Hours of Le Mans, it's not, the Rolex 24, it's not that kind of an endurance race, but compared to F1, even compared to IndyCar, compared to World of Outlaws or a lot of dirt races that are just literal sprints, NASCAR is an endurance race. And to have a race like the Coke 600 that's kind of a one-off 600-mile special length event highlights that, and I think that actually is a good thing for the sport. NASCAR can have a few of these crown jewel races that really, I think they are rooted in tradition. That's part of what makes them crown jewel races, and it's this prestige that comes with that tradition. I think those are races that should more or less remain mostly untouched. So Hamlin's saying that a Coke 300 trophy would mean the same to him as a Coke 600 trophy. I think he's just saying that. I don't know if he actually means that, because I do think having a Coca-Cola 600 trophy, I think means more than winning a Coke 300 or winning a 300-mile race. Just because to say you ran 600 miles longer than any other NASCAR race's scheduled distance and were able to still come out on top, that's a test to your endurance. That's something impressive. So Denny Hamlin here, I appreciate him stirring the pot. I'll show you some more tweets here, but I don't fully agree with everything he's saying here. I think he deserves to be heard out. I don't think we should just dismiss him like, oh, he's wanting to mess with tradition, we should just dismiss him. Definitely shouldn't do that. We should listen to what Hamlin's saying and other drivers that say things like this. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with them, but we should at least hear them out, because I think going forward, his way might be the best way for NASCAR in a broader sense. Not necessarily in every sense, not like Coke 600, Daytona 500. I don't want to touch those too much, but in a general sense, I think Hamlin might have a point here, and I think he deserves to be heard out. In response to Jeff Gluck's tweet, which brought this to my attention initially, you had other drivers and reporters reacting. Bob Pockrass put this tweet out saying most of the other drivers he talked to disagreed. So that sounds like there are a lot of NASCAR drivers out there that don't agree with Denny Hamlin's opinion here and actually think the races should stay as long as they are now. Interesting. I mean, you gotta have different conversations, as Denny Hamlin responded to there. Gotta have a discussion about it, because whatever NASCAR is doing right now isn't perfect. It's obviously not as good as it once was. NASCAR can get better. NASCAR is not at its best right now. This is not the best NASCAR can be in 2019. So there's definitely room to improve, and some things should be considered. I like Tyler Reddick's response. We just need to go a lot faster so the race goes by quicker. A World 600 package with 1,500 horsepower and 5,000 pounds of downforce. Problem solved. Yeah, you're a very funny boy there, Tyler Reddick. But needless to say, I think the point stands. Hamlin should be heard out here. You don't have to agree with him, but you at least, NASCAR is not in any position where they need to be ignoring opinions. All right, but enough of that. That's old news, technically. I talked yesterday a little bit about how the ISC deal has gone through, or it has not gone through. It has not been finally approved, but it looks like it is going to be approved. NASCAR buying up ISC for $2 billion. I basically talked a little bit about that yesterday, just to reiterate. This is good news, I think, if you're a fan who wants NASCAR to change the schedule in the near future, because NASCAR having more direct control over ISC will allow them to schedule more easily influence the schedule, especially around those tracks. NASCAR is no longer going to have to negotiate and compromise with another company. Now it's all in-house. They only really have to negotiate with themselves, and I feel like that's a lot easier to do. So it's going to be easier for NASCAR going forward to make drastic changes to the schedule. So that's important regarding that news. The last thing I want to talk about, we saw yesterday, the class of 2020 NASCAR Hall of Fame inductees were revealed. 5 more legends will be inducted into the Hall of Fame in January, and those people are drivers Bobby Labonte, Tony Stewart, owners Joe Gibbs, then you have Waddle Waddle Wilson, and Buddy Baker, a couple legends as well, all making it to the Hall of Fame. Tony Stewart, this was his first year on the ballot, so quite impressive, quite a great crop of legends in the NASCAR world right there. You have 3 guys affiliated with Joe Gibbs Racing, the early days of Joe Gibbs Racing, with Labonte, Stewart, and obviously Joe Gibbs. Now, the interesting point about Joe Gibbs here, he is now an NFL Hall of Famer and a NASCAR Hall of Famer. What a legacy. I'm sorry, that's crazy. Just to give you a little overview of all these guys, Tony Stewart retired at the end of the 2016 season, so this was his first year of eligibility, and he got 88% of the vote, so pretty much a shoo-in. He's a 3-time Cup Series champ. He has 49 career Cup Series wins, which is 14th on the all-time wins list. Say what you will about his temper, but that's what made him one of the most loved and hated drivers of his time. Great polarizing figure, great personality, still heavily involved with the sport today. Obviously, he's a team owner, a co-owner of Stewart Haas Racing. He owns Eldora Speedway, which the trucks race on. So Tony Stewart, even in his retirement from driving, is still very involved in the sport today. Obvious why he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, no question from me. Really, none of these 5 guys are going to be questioned by me. I think all of them are Hall of Fame deserving. There's some other guys that didn't make it in this year that probably deserve to be in as well. Hopefully they get in the next couple of years. Joe Gibbs has great stats as well. He's a 4-time Cup Series champion as an owner. He's also 3rd on the all-time Cup Series wins list as an owner. I already mentioned how he's also an NFL Hall of Famer for being a 3-time Super Bowl winning coach, so that's pretty crazy. He got 72% of the vote, definitely deserving. Bobby Labonte, in his 3rd year on the ballot, got 67% of the vote. He's a 21-time Cup Series winner, also won the championship in the year 2000. Really interesting to see all 3 Joe Gibbs, Joe Gibbs legends, Joe Gibbs Racing legends all make it in at the same exact time. I tend to think that might have skewed the vote a little bit. Not saying Bobby Labonte or Joe Gibbs or any of these guys didn't deserve to get in this year, but maybe that skewed the vote a little bit. Like Bobby Labonte, this is his 3rd year on the ballot. Maybe voters were waiting just for this opportunity to put him in there with Stewart and with Joe Gibbs. I don't know. I'm just going to speculate here. I don't know, obviously, what was going on through the voting panel's heads, but it's suspicious. But still, definitely deserving. Not saying Bobby Labonte does not deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. He definitely does. Waddle Wilson, legendary engine builder, built engines for some of NASCAR's all-time greats. He was also a 22-time winner as a crew chief, won 3 Daytona 500s, I believe. I got to check the history books on this one. Great career and great name. Waddle Wilson. I love that a lot. And speaking of great names, Buddy Baker is the 5th and final member to make it into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. In this year's class, he's a 19-time Cup Series winner, but he was known for winning a lot of NASCAR's biggest and most prestigious races. He has a Daytona 500 win. He won at Daytona multiple times. He won at Charlotte. He won at Darlington. He won at Talladega. He had a knack for winning the biggest and most prestigious races in NASCAR. So Buddy Baker, another very deserving driver to make it on, or make it into the Hall of Fame. I didn't mention it, but Waddle Wilson got 72% of the vote. Buddy Baker got 70% of the vote, so both of them made it in pretty solidly. 3 people with the highest votes to not make it into the Hall of Fame this year include Mike Stefanik, Ray Fox, and Herschel McGriff. They all came up just a little bit short this year. There's some other pretty big name drivers that didn't make it in this year, but will likely get in on future ballots perhaps. Ricky Rudd among those. Overall, I think it's hard to say that the 5 people who made it in this year don't deserve it. I think the voters, for the most part, got this one right. There's definitely some names back there, like we mentioned, that I think deserve to make it in on future ballots. The way the NASCAR Hall of Fame voting works is kind of weird. You have to wait 3 years after you retire to be eligible, and then I don't actually know how long you stay on the ballot. I think it's for like a decade or so. Either way, very cool, especially if you're a Joe Gibbs Racing fan, especially if you're an old school Joe Gibbs Racing fan, to see those 3 guys make it in this year. Gotta be a fun moment. Really, congrats to all the nominees. And that's my show. That's all I really want to talk about today. So thanks for watching, everyone. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. You can check out the link, the description down there to get t-shirts if you want to support me that way. And remember, this is basically the final call. If you wanted to mail me anything to my P.O. Box, this is basically, you have technically 2 more days to do that, but I would do that ASAP to make sure I get it before I have to close my P.O. Box for the summer. But thanks for checking that out. And again, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. Michael Harrison at Jews of the Stars, SelfishGifts.com, Mentally Defective, Cameron James, John Koblenz, Jason R. Long, Wesley Donaldson, Isaac Dennison, Mika Suzuki, iFantasyRace.com, TheRacingInsiders.com, and the rest of these awesome Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for continuing to help support the show. Greatly appreciated. Couldn't do this without all the amazing partners. You guys on Patreon, you guys who watch, really means a lot. And thank you so much. Memorial Day weekend just around the corner. A lot of great racing, a lot of great NASCAR racing. I hope you guys have a fun one. I'll be seeing you guys late Sunday night after the Coke 600. I should have an Out of the Groove up late that evening unless something crazy happens. But I guess, yeah, I probably won't see you guys until then. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week and a good weekend. See you very soon, everyone.